Another tragic police altercation. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Michael Miller, former Franklin County prosecutor, and Sam Gresham of Common Cause, Ohio. Once again, a white Columbus police officer has shot and killed a black person, prompting protests and outrage. But this case is different. Here's what we know. Someone on Tuesday called police to a Southeast Side home saying they were being stabbed and attacked. Police responded. There was a fight. A girl had a knife, and that girl, 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant, was shot by Officer Nicholas Reardon. The officer's body camera captured the moments before and after the shooting. Here we've slowed it down for you. Here you see the officer leave his cruiser, and Bryant, in a dark top and pants, confronts a woman or girl on the sidewalk. The officer repeatedly yells to get down. Ma'Khia Bryant then charges at another woman or a girl dressed in a pink sweatsuit. Bryant is holding a knife and raises it toward the woman, and that's when Officer Reardon fires 4 shots and Bryant falls to the ground.
A teenage girl is dead. And she's dead at the hands of a police officer. Under any circumstances, that is a horrendous tragedy. But the video shows that there is more to this. It requires us to pause, take a close look at the sequence of events, and though it's not easy, wait for the facts as determined by an independent investigation.
The shooting happened almost simultaneously with the Derek Chauvin guilty verdicts in Minnesota, and it sparked protests in the neighborhood where it happened and also in downtown Columbus. Sam Gresham, what do you see when you see that video?
I see a lot of anguish that goes through my community. I've been on telephone nonstop about talking to people about this. Some people say it's a good shoot. Some people say it's not a good shoot. There are a particular set of circumstances that create conflict even in the Black community. I think what you said is at the opening, we'll have to wait until all of the context of this information. I've watched that video 1,000 times, and anyone who watches the video can come to a different conclusion about it. But I do know this as a fact. Columbus has a problem. We have had in this city from 2015, 34 or 38, whichever number you want, of police shootings, and 23 of those have been African Americans. Columbus has been rated the 18th largest county, or Franklin County, where we have the most police-involved shootings. There are a series of things about this situation where one could either ask, what was the predisposition of the officer? What was the young lady doing? I do know if the officer did not have a gun and a badge, how would he have resolved this situation? There's a lot I can say, but I'll save that for the rest of the show.
Okay, yeah, we'll get back to you. Mike Miller, how do you see this video? What do you see when you watch what happened?
Well, obviously, Mike, there's always, any time anybody loses their life, it's a sad thing. And I suppose it's even more so when you're talking about a 16-year-old child. But what I've seen, and I wasn't there, but assuming this film is accurate, somebody calls the police department. He just doesn't wander around and says, somebody's trying to stab me or outside. It's panic time. So the police send the person there and he shows up. That's what he's supposed to do. So he sees this woman fall and another woman or girl with what appears to be a knife in her hand, yells repeatedly to get down. She doesn't, and she races towards another woman, raises the knife, and he shoots her. I mean, you can second guess or Monday morning quarterback anything, can arrive at any conclusion you wish. But I think those facts are pretty much indisputable. The people that want to hold him accountable, I don't think the facts are going to mean anything. I think if he would have actually done nothing, and if this 16-year-old girl would then stab this person and kill her or severely wounded her, I'm sure he would be in for the same criticism that he's going to get now. You know, you didn't do anything because you didn't want to help protect this black girl. You just let her be stabbed. So I think either way it goes, he's going to get criticized. Just looking at it from the law, I don't see anything wrong. He may not like the law, but I don't think he's done anything that's in violation of it. And the people that I've seen, the so-called experts, if they really exist, I mean, specifically one I think they quoted from Bowling Green University, said he can see nothing in the tape that indicated any violation of the law, that the man was justified doing what he did. Now, would I have done that? I don't know. You never know what you're going to do until you're there. We all know it's a split-second decision. And I suppose, and again, Monday morning quarterbacking, we can always say, well, I think I would have done this or he shouldn't have done that. But he doesn't have that time. It's instant. Somebody has called and said they're being attacked by a knife. He shows up, he sees a woman with a knife, knocking one person down, going after another one. I don't know that he has any choice. But
Sam,
as I said, it's
yes.
so sad that you
Yeah.
can always.
Sam,
Yes,
let me put it. If we could, it's impossible to separate this from what's going on. I mean, this happened 20 minutes before the guilty verdicts came down in the Chauvin case in Minnesota. That no doubt added to the passion regarding this. We've had 2 other shootings in Columbus in the past few months. But looking at this in particular case alone, if you can separate it, do you see where this might have been an appropriate use of force, or do you think the officer could have done more to avoid it?
I think there are people who have strong positions, and I've been on the phone with some of those people talking about that. But the humanity of it and how I would have handled it, given I don't have a badge and a gun, and if I face this situation, I find a way to de-escalate it. Now, by the way, I've been in these situations with guns and knives, and nobody got killed and nobody went to jail. Now, what does bother me is, did it take 4 shots? Did it take 4 shots? The girl weighed 140 pounds. It didn't take that much. Even if he stabbed, she stabbed the girl in her leg and she was going towards her torso or the lower body. You still could have taken her down. And then you could have worked on whoever was hurt. I know people disagree with that,
Yeah.
but I don't believe that 4 shots were necessary to take this girl down.
Mike Miller,
Now,
let me ask you about that, because if the body camera's footage has shown, and the cell phone footage has shown over the past couple of years, that when there is a police shooting, oftentimes the officer shoots many shots. They empty their clip. There was a shooting at St. Anne's Hospital a couple of weeks ago, and there were a couple of officers there, and they fired dozens of shots at this man who had a gun in the emergency room. Should that policy be changed? Do you have to shoot that many times?
Michael, I worry about that all the time. Yeah. And see, there's a philosophical difference. Is it de-escalation or compliance and control? When he hit the scene, hollering, "Get on the ground, get on the ground."
Well, actually, Sam, he did say when he first got there, if you look at the tape, he said his first question was when he got out of the car, "What's going on?" And almost immediately, the teenager came towards him and pushed the other girl down, or she fell, or whatever happened. We're not quite sure. Mike Miller, I would get your take on the number of shots, and is there a way to possibly de-escalate before you first turn to the gun?
Well, let me get with the shots to start off with. Everybody assumes that these policemen or me or you or anybody else with a gun is Annie Oakley, that you can shoot one time and let's just shoot them in the calf and to say it's just not reality. That's not life. TV maybe, movies yes, not life. They're taught to shoot at a body mass because that's the best chance they have. 4 shots repeatedly, he probably didn't. You can hardly tell the difference. It's happened so quick. So I don't look at the shots as anything out of the ordinary or horrendous. And I understand what Sam's saying, but when you say, Sam says, I would try and de-escalate this, and that's great. I think I would too, hopefully if I were there. But what time does he have? He gets a call that there's a stabbing. He goes, he immediately sees somebody go down and another woman with her hand up with a knife this far or whatever from this other one. Now, what's he supposed to do? Wait until she's stabbed and then do something? Or does he do something, then to try and save this other person from being stabbed, possibly murdered?
Well, Mike, two things I'll take in consideration. I disagree with the training. And the training is about compliance. I don't think that's the right way to go with that. And there are a lot of countries outside of the United States that de-escalate. In fact, they don't even have guns. But let's stay with the particulars here. The police officer has a vest on. Am I correct? He has a shooting vest on. The person weighs less than 130 pounds. She has a knife. It is not a big knife. It is not a very sharp knife from what I've seen. She is striking at the waist and below the torso of the individual. He could have tackled that young lady, absorbed the blows of the knife, cuffed her. And if she had cut the other person, then he could have started offering services to her. I do not believe it was necessary to shoot that young lady 4 times. One bullet would have taken her down. Now, what I think the 4 shots do is about training and about predisposition. When you say you shoot that many times on a young girl, first you divorce her humanity. You don't see her as a young girl who is lightweight and really acting out as a teenager. Does she need to die? I don't think she needs to die for out here with a knife and her friend.
All right. Sam, I want to get Mike Miller. Then we're going to move on to other topic. Mike, I'll give you the last word on this. Should cops look to other things besides using their guns first?
Well, all I can go back to, Mike, is he's called because there's a stabbing or something. He goes, he sees one woman down, another one raising her hand. What's he supposed to do? He doesn't know she's 16 years old. She's somebody with a knife, and believe me, 16-year-old people with knives can kill other people. Whether she would have or not, we'll never know. But he's just reacting, and is 1 shot or 4 to me. If you listen to those, they're simultaneously. It's not like he shoots and stands around and waits 2 minutes and shoots again.
Mike, that's about her humanity. If you knew who this young lady was, she didn't deserve to die. She was a basketball player. She was at a house where some people came over there to beat her up. She was defending herself. And in this circumstance, she was on her way to college. She has no sheet. She's never hurt anybody. She doesn't have a record. Why did she have to die? She didn't have to die.
Did anybody, Sam, tell that to the police? Did anybody say anything except come over here? There's a person with a knife trying to stab us.
Yeah,
that's
but
all
Mike,
he knows.
Okay. I've been in that situation at my facility, other places. I de-escalated the situation. Now, I had one thing going for me. The people trusted me when I came in the room. I knew how to use my voice commands, and I knew what to say. He's supposed to be trained in that. Police, drop that knife. Then you can shoot.
Yeah. All right. We'll have to. This is a terribly tragic story, and we'll hopefully learn more in the days and weeks to come as to what caused it and what the result will be. But anyway, on to politics. We have a Democrat on the statewide ballot for 2022. Dayton Mayor Nan Whaley is running for governor. In her kickoff video, she goes after what she calls the Republican monopoly on power at the State House.
We could use a little more tough in Columbus, a little bit of strength of character to call out right from wrong.
So what do you have to say to Ohio?
Because right now, corruption, cronyism, and criminal conduct is just the way things are done. And our leaders are too weak to do something.
Sam Gresham, does Nan Whaley excite Democrats?
Michael, I don't know what it's going to take to excite Democrats. They need a better organization. They need better leadership. And they need a 5-year plan. They don't have a 5-year plan. The Republican Party had a 5 to 8 year plan where they were developing people. Nan Whaley, along with the gentleman who is up in Youngstown, who's talking about running for the Senate. I can't think of his name.
Congressman Tim Ryan. Yep.
Tim Ryan are probably the best known names across the state that the Democrats have. I think the Republicans have a formidable group of DeWine's going to be hard to beat. Houston's going to be hard to beat. I think the Democrats need a 5-year plan, because if they don't, DeWine's going to win, Houston's going to win, or Yost is going to take them all out. They seem to have candidates with better name recognition.
Mike Miller, Nan Whaley has been, she and Mike DeWine have had a pretty cordial relationship over the past couple of years. You know, Nan Whaley ran for governor in 2018, left the race before the primary. She never actually had to run against him, but after the shooting, they went to a couple different events together. They actually went to they made a joint appearance at a vaccine clinic in the not too recent past. But now she's going after him, which of course she has to if she's going to run against him. But it will be an interesting campaign should she make it through the primary.
Well, I saw that little word that you put on. I saw the whole thing, and to me, it's just political spin. She doesn't have to go after DeWine and call him what she said, you know, inadequate, inept, yeah, something like that. It just seemed to me political spin. I was not impressed by it at all. Why she has to do that? Why can't you just come forward and say, I want to be governor. I think I can do this and this and this and help things. This is what I want to do. Except coming in and jumping on DeWine, and then, you know, this corruptness that seeps through everybody. You know, the federal people arrested Householder. That's the only thing that I'm aware of. And it just, to me, I'd just like to see a campaign all the way through on a high level. Maybe that's impossible in this day and age.
Yeah. I think on that note, I think Sam answered that question. Anyway, as Nan Whaley looks to move up the political ladder, Steve Stivers is jumping off. Stivers, who says he was moments away from launching a U.S. Senate bid, instead took the job as president and CEO of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. He says a big jump in pay, he'll likely make about double what he makes in Congress, and the ability to live full-time close to his wife and children prompted his decision. He says he's not leaving Congress because of frustration with partisan gridlock, but he admits it's a problem.
I do agree that we need to do better, but I will say, Mike, Congress represents its constituents, and it's not that Congress is divided, it's that America. And when you talk to your listeners and folks across the state of Ohio, you know, if you're in Logan, Ohio, in Hocking County, you're going to hear one viewpoint. If you're in urban Columbus, you'll hear a completely different viewpoint. We've got to do a better job of bringing people together. And frankly, Mike, that's why I am excited about the new role.
Mike Miller, you know, oftentimes politicians will say, I'm leaving my job because I want to spend more time with my family. In this case, you know what? I believe Steve Stivers. He wants to come back to Columbus.
I do too. I believe him. And when you say he's making twice the money, or going to make twice the money as he's making now, and get to live, you know, near his family on a regular basis and lead what I would think is a more hectic life, I don't blame him one bit. I do think, however, that the enjoyment of being in Congress is not what it used to be. I can recall, maybe 15 years ago, I think there were 6 senators who decided not to run for re-election, and they were split. I think 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, or maybe 4 and 2. And saw them on a news show, and they said, well, there's 2 things. From the day the election is over, the very next day you start raising money, and it goes on for 6 years, or in a congressional seat, 2 years. Mm-hmm. And there is no, the dealings with the other side is so difficult. The congeniality that used to be, you know, it used to be, we always go back to, at least recently, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, you know, arguing all the time and this and that over whatever issue, this and that publicly. And when it's all over, going to have a drink together. You know, I wish we had a world like that, and I don't think we have it now.
Sam Gresham, you know, Steve Stivers is a conservative, but he's what we call the reasonable Republican. He would do things with Joyce Beatty, the congresswoman from Columbus. And if he leaves, I mean, who replaces him, and is it a bad sign that a lot of reasonable Republicans like Rob Portman, Steve Stivers have decided to pursue jobs or lives outside of Washington?
Well, first of all, I need to say I know Steve. Steve was on the board at the Urban League when I served there. He's a decent guy, but it's a bit more complex. there's going to be a redistricting scenario coming up soon as the census gives the state house the data. And the district that Steve had, boy, it was almost as bad as the snake on the lake. So I don't think that district exists, but I couldn't think of a better person to run the Columbus Chamber of Commerce than Steve Stivers at this point.
Mike Miller, Steve Stivers said if he didn't get the job at the chamber, he was going to run for Senate. He had raised $1.5 million, just about 1.5 in the first few months of this year. Could he have been could he have won that primary?
Well, I don't know if he would win it. I think he would certainly be strong, but I think there are other people in there, Mandel and Timken, and who are well known, and I think they can both raise money. So I think it would have been a horse race. Whether he would have won or not, I can't say, but he was certainly been a strong candidate.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Can I add to that, Michael?
Yes, please. Go ahead, Sam.
The Republicans have a strong stable of candidates now with high name recognition all over the state. But the Democrats are building a stable of candidates with the heart of it coming out of Columbus. You got Zach, you got
Klein,
the mayor, yep. you got lots of people on city council who are capable. You got Kevin Boyce. So there is a bench being developed by the Democrats that is going to allow them, I'd say 3 to 4 years from now, to be able to compete on a statewide basis if those candidates decide to do what they want to do. There are a couple of candidates, if they are serious about running for statewide office. There are some candidates in Cleveland that are developing young people. So I don't think this lack of competitiveness on the Democratic Party standpoint is going to last long. At most 4 or 5 years. And they're going to be competitive if they get a good state executive director.
All right. It was kind of a good news, kind of bad news kind of week in Ohio's battle against COVID. The good news, after rising for several weeks, the number of new cases in Ohio has plateaued. The bad news, the rate of new cases is still pretty high. The good news, 38% of Ohioans have received at least one vaccine shot. The bad news, after several weeks of rapid increases, the rate of vaccination has slowed. Now health officials and private companies are offering incentives to get the shot. White Castle is giving away free desserts for people who get the jab. Sam Gresham, the cases are starting to come down a little bit. Do you think we have turned what we hope is the final corner on this pandemic?
Michael, I hope so, because we've absolutely committed ourselves to herd immunity. And if we don't get that 85, 90% level, we're going to really be in trouble in this country. And now we got variances and a new wave. I understand the hesitancy on all parts of the community, with the exception of the political hesitancy, purely for that purpose. But we're going to have to make this work because we've committed ourselves to it and we have no other alternative.
Mike Miller, the governor this week, he has set this bar at 50 cases for every 100,000 of population for 2 weeks. If we hit that level, he will lift all the health restrictions. We're at like 185. We're not close right now, but it did come down a bit this week. And the governor said he'll look at other things. Kentucky, for instance, they set their bar at 2.5 million people vaccinated. They're about 800,000 away. Should the governor change what the bar is for lifting the restrictions?
Well, should is a different question. Do I think he will? I'm not going to say he should, but I think he will. If it comes down low, if we get maybe 100 as opposed to the 50, there's going to become a point where I think the experts will say, all right, it is now going to hurt us more to keep it this way. Let's get the economy rolling again. Let's do some stuff. I think, baseball is an example. I don't know what the number is, but I think Cleveland is like 16% or something. And I'd heard that they think May 1st, they can have 40% of the people, in the stadium. I think that gradual change is going to happen. So I guess I would say I do not think he will stick to the 50, the number of 50. I don't think he's going to change. If it's 185 now, he's going to say, okay, 175 is enough.
No.
But I think if you drop down a good amount, but not quite get 50. He'll do it.
All right, let's get to our off the record final parting shots. Mike Miller, you're up first.
Well, I just would like to see a situation where we all get along better, to quote Rodney King. Like this situation, Sam and I disagree on a lot of things. Today, I think we agreed about everything except the first issue. But we know we have these problems, and I know Sam is of one political build and I'm the other one. But, when we have these things and we're together, not virtual, Sam and I almost always stand in a parking lot and talk for 10 or 15 minutes, and we enjoy each other. We disagree each other, but we like each other, and we would try and work something out. And I wish the community would do that and other issues. I think it would make for a better world and a much more enjoyable one.
All right, Sam Gresham.
When Mike was a prosecutor, we worked out some deals too. So I want to say that we worked out some things that need to be taken care of. My concern is this escalating shooting thing. People didn't listen to what I said. We had 38 shootings in 2015. We are 18th in the country for large counties. We've had 8 shootings already in 2020. This community needs to come together, figure out what we're going to do, the police advisory committee, whatever.
All right.
These shootings have to
Sam,
stop.
we got to cut you off there. We're running out of time. Thanks for joining us here this week on Columbus on the Record. Check us out online, WOSU.org, and Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff. For Sam and Mike, I'm Mike Thompson, and for our crew here at WOSU, have a good week.